All right, for those of you who are joining us today, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes for people to get in. And I think we'll start at 5:10. Rebecca, is that okay?
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, so it's 5:10. I guess we'll get started. Okay, hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome everyone to our workshop for the evening. And we titled it Welcome to Myths Busted, Getting Research During COVID-19. And so tonight, Vicki and I will be your MCs. My name is Rebecca, and we're very excited to have you all attend our workshop. And we really hope that this is an insightful experience for you all, and hopefully get some of your questions answered about research opportunities. And so, next slide in. Perfect. So just to give a little bit background about our organization, CORE, which stands for Canadian Organization for Undergraduate Health Research. And so what our organization aims to do, our mission, is to help provide different various research opportunities specifically for underrepresented students here at Western. And so we have a variety of very exciting events planned throughout the year to help students acquire and master certain skills that will be very helpful and useful for their research opportunities and experiences down the road. And lastly, you may have noticed, and maybe you visited our Facebook site and learned more about our summer literature review project, which we'll talk more about later this evening. And essentially what we did there was we published infographics based on literature reviews with the goals of communicating scientific information to the lay audience and general public. Okay.
Yep, so if you're hearing about us for the first time, welcome. We're very happy you're able to join us tonight, and stay tuned until closer to the end of our presentation tonight to find out a little bit more in depth, little details about our organization. So what will you gain from this event tonight? I'm sure as we've all been experiencing living in the pandemic today, we've been dealing with all sorts of different misinformation spreading about, and it's been really tough. And in a very similar fashion, finding opportunities for research and navigating that for the first time can be very challenging. So based on the personal experience and research stories, we hope that this workshop will be able to provide you with deeper insight on research and debunk some misconceptions about the process, and also offer some personal tips and advice. So our event today will consist of a keynote speaker, Professor Dhanvantari, who will be speaking a little bit about her own journey and share some tips with you guys. And following her, we will move on to a student speaker panel.
Just a quick note on the side, if you haven't already done so, we do ask that you mute your microphones and turn off your videos for now, just to make sure that there's no issues with the bandwidth, but there will be opportunities later this evening for our Q&A sessions for you to ask questions. And throughout the talks, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and Vicki and I will be monitoring those. Okay, so I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Dhanvantari. And we're extremely honored and excited to have her as our keynote speaker. So just a little introduction and background. Dr. Dhanvantari is a scientist in imaging research program at the Lawson Health Research Institute at St. Joseph's Hospital, and also associate professor in the departments of medical biophysics and pathology and laboratory medicine here at Western. She's also the director of the Biomedical and Imaging Research Center in London. She grew up in Kingsville, Ontario, and attended Guelph, Western, and Toronto for her university education. She's then spent 5 years at the US National Institute of Health for her postdoctoral training before coming back to London in 2002. Her research programs explore the cell biology of diabetes and heart failure with an emphasis on quantitative imaging. Savita is also an avid swimmer and is a member of the London Silver Dolphins, a competitive master swim team. She identifies as female, her pronouns are she, her, and she's a strong advocate of feminism and anti-racism in science. Tonight, we are very fortunate to hear her give a presentation titled Busting the Myth of the Scary Professor and Getting into Research. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Dhanvantari.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca, for that very kind introduction. And I will need to share my screen.
Yes, I think, Andy, maybe you stop sharing for now, and then Dr. Dhanvantari can share hers. Perfect.
Okay. So, so thank you so much for inviting me to talk at this really important event. I really appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to talk to undergraduate students. I was asked to talk about, myth busting. And one of the first things that, or first examples that I'd like to give you is a slide like this. And this professors' lectures or some talks. It's very typical. We like to splash all of our, various positions and awards and accolades to the audience. And, I'm professor of this and director of that. I can show you all my cool work. And my graduate students once said, well, why don't you introduce yourself as more of a human being? And I thought, well, that's probably a good idea. So instead of highlighting, I'm professor of this and scientist of that, perhaps a slide like this might be a little bit better as to who I am. My Twitter handle, for those of you who are on Twitter and follow scientists on Twitter, my pronouns, and tell you that I'm actually, I'm also a mentor to a number of undergraduate and graduate students in the field of molecular imaging, as well as other fields. Mentoring is more than just, direct supervision in the lab. I've been a mentor to many, many students who actually were not part of my lab. And so that's a position that I treat with a lot of respect. I'm also a feminist, and I advocate quite strongly, both within Lawson and the university, for issues surrounding equity and diversity and inclusion. And as well on social media, I advocate a lot for cool science, which is particularly important now in this day and age of COVID. I am also a swimmer, as Rebecca said. Before COVID hit, I would go to the gym and lift weights. I'm also an avid skier. I like to cook. I like to camp. And I'll end my talk with some nice scenery slides of what I like to do outside of science. So perhaps that, paints a little bit more broader picture of who I am, rather than, just saying I'm a professor and I'm a scientist at Lawson. So in terms of myth busting, I first want to highlight that I do come from a position of privilege, and these photos here will highlight this privilege. And so this particular photo is a picture of my grandfather, my dad's father. Here you see a picture of my mom's father, and this is a picture of my dad. And so my dad's father was a professor himself. He was a professor of English literature, and he taught Shakespeare, and he cultivated that love of higher education amongst his children and grandchildren. My mom's father came from a long line of lawyers, and he was a high court lawyer in India. And so I also have uncles and cousins who are lawyers. And my dad himself was a research scientist. And so I want to tell you this because I may not have experienced very many barriers when it comes to approaching research in higher education because of this background. So like I said, my dad was a research scientist, and he cultivated in me from a very early age a love of science. And so, you know, I was a science from a very early age. I asked all sorts of questions about how things worked. And really from an early age, I mean, this is a picture of me, I think I was about 10 or 11 years old. And at this age, you know, I would go to the library, right? I would go to the library and I would read books on taxonomy. I thought they were fascinating. I was just fascinated with science. All my other friends at that age were reading, you know, Teen Beat and Tiger Beat magazine, but I was much more comfortable in the library reading about science. And again, this was possible because this quality was encouraged in me by my parents. So, in terms of my own personal journey, as Rebecca had said in her introduction of me, I come from a small town called Kingsville, which is not that far from here. And I actually did my education all across Southwestern Ontario. I went to Guelph for my bachelor's. I actually came to Western to do my master's, did my PhD in Toronto, and then went to Washington, D.C. to do 5 years of a postdoctoral fellowship before I came back to Western and to Lawson. And now when people see this kind of trajectory, they kind of assume that it all sort of was very smooth and, you know, I just went from place to place with a predefined kind of idea of what I wanted to do. And that really wasn't the case. When I went to Guelph, my original thought was that I would become a vet. I wanted to go to vet school. And that didn't happen. I didn't have the marks. I didn't get admission into vet school. And so that sort of left me scratching my head for a bit. And I thought, well, you know, I'll just continue along to learn more about animal physiology. At that point, I didn't even really know if I wanted to do research. But in my 4th year, I had an opportunity to do a research project as part of a course. And so I approached a professor and asked if they would take me on, and they said yes. And so as a result, I got my very first publication. This is way, 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 way back, 1989. And I still have this paper. I'm quite proud of it because it gave me a first taste of what research was like. And I liked it. I decided it was a lot of fun. So I ended up getting a master's and a PhD and going that route. So, so that's kind of a very brief synopsis of my journey. And I want to sort of tell you what I learned along that journey in terms of, you know, what's the insider's perspective on actually getting into research. So I've sort of made up like 4 questions that maybe people would ask or other people would ask, or questions that I have heard from other students, right, on how to get into research. So one question, you know, might be, well, how do you know what field of research you want to go into? And you don't really. So, you know, what do you find that's very interesting? What is your personal reason? So was it a lecture that you enjoyed in a particular class? Is it a particular professor that, you know, that you really like and want to find out more about what they do? Do you have somebody who's close to you that has some kind of chronic condition that you want to find out more about? So personal reasons really provide a very powerful motivation for wanting to get into research. For me, it was basically a lecture. I went to a lecture by a particular professor, and he talked about mechanisms of hormone secretion, and I went, oh wow, that is really interesting. And so that's what kind of motivated me into doing this 4th year research project. So another question is, well, how do you actually get into a lab? And so what I would suggest to people who want to work in a research lab is just do a little bit of homework beforehand. So if there's a professor that you like, look them up. Look up their webpage or search them on Google Scholar or ResearchGate to get a feel for sort of what they do and if that aligns with something that you find interesting. If you have a TA, ask about their research project. They're all graduate students, and ask if their supervisor has undergrads in the lab. And also send the professor an email, or better yet, book time during their office hours, or talk to them after class. And that way you'll get a feel for what kind of person they are, as well as an interest of what they want to get done in their lab. So contacting a professor sounds kind of scary, right? Sounds kind of intimidating, especially if you're in your first and second year, and how do you go about it? So one thing that you should remember is that every professor loves to talk about their work. And if you get into their office and they start talking about their work, oh, good luck trying to get out of that office, because they're just going to go on and on and on and on. So they really like to talk about their work. If you engage them about their work, they'll talk about it. And also, there's a lot of professors who are actually looking for undergrads to work on a project. There's lots of opportunities, whether it's through a summer research program, or whether it's through a third or fourth year course that has a research project associated with it. And they look for undergrads for a number of reasons, but probably the best reason is that undergrads are really the pipeline from which future graduate students are recruited. A lot of professors, once they get a student in their lab, they want to keep them there if they're productive, and if they work well, and if they get along with everybody. So the final question is, after all of this, well, what do I say, right? I contact a professor. So what I would suggest is this. If you're going to contact them, always address professors as doctor. Always, right? Don't say, well, the first time that I've seen you and you send me an email, say, yo, Savita, and I'm thinking, well, not sure about that address. Make it formal, and write a really concise and compelling message. So introduce yourself, I'm in such and such a class. I'd like to talk to you. I really enjoyed your lecture. I read your paper. Stuff like that. So that really gets us motivated. When we hear things like, I enjoyed your lecture, we get all the feels. It's nice. We like it when students say stuff like that. And it gets us interested in talking to you. So before you hit send on that email, read over your email very, very carefully. It takes me probably about a half an hour to write a really well-crafted email. And so you should spend some time and make sure that that email says what you want it to say. And then 2 days later, you'll probably have to hit send again. And the reason I say that is because as a professor, I get 5 to 6 requests a week from students who want to work in the lab. So, and I get probably about 30 to 40 emails a day. And so you have to compete with that avalanche of emails. So don't worry about badgering us. Just hit send again. So I'm coming to the end of my time. I just wanted to show you a little picture of my lab, that what it looked like a couple of years ago. My students are some of my favorite people. And these are just pictures of some of the grad students I've had in my lab in the past. Rebecca is still with me. Farzad recently graduated with his PhD. Maya and Ahmed graduated with their masters a few years ago. And Nabil and Derek were my undergraduate research project students. So, so I'm just going to skip to the end here and just leave you with some nice pictures of things that you still can do in the age of COVID. Get out, enjoy the great outdoors, go swimming, go skiing. And these are the things that I like to do when I'm not thinking about science. And with that, I think I'll end and take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Dhanvantari. That was definitely a very special presentation. Even in 4th year now, I still find a lot of your words very memorable and very practical going forward for myself even. So thank you for sharing all those inspiring experiences and tips.
Thank you very much.
Great. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, turn on your video and say hello and ask your question, that works too.
Now, one thing I didn't address specifically is about how to find a research position during the age of COVID. So is there anybody who would like to hear a little bit about that?
We're getting a lot of yes, please, yes, please. It's coming.
Okay. All right.
That's
So,
perfect.
so as professors, we've been talking a lot about this. You know, how do we get students back in the lab in this age of COVID? One thing that you should know is that we are all very anxious to get our research programs up and running. From March to June, it was basically nothing. We had to shut everything down and, you know, let people take care of themselves. And then we slowly started to ramp up our research in sort of mid-June, early July. Some labs are fully ramped up and some are not. So in this age of COVID, don't let that stop you. People are still looking. Professors are still looking. And actually now is a really good time to ask if professors are taking students in the lab, because a lot of professors just found out about their research grants. And so now they have projects to work on. Their graduate students need help doing the work. And so, you know, now is probably a really good time to ask. You may get more no's, you know, more professors saying, you know, I really don't know at this time, but that's okay. You know, like I said, most of us are looking to get our research up and going. And we know now that or students in their third and fourth year are looking for research projects for their coursework. And so we're all still very, very open about taking students in. There's been a real push to find students who can do work remotely. So if there's any like image analysis they can do online, or if there's any kind of literature review they can do online, we're encouraged to take students who can at least do some work outside of the lab and not be physically present in the lab.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have a question here from Harrison. Harrison said, you mentioned that 2 days later, if you hit send again, if we really want to work with a particular professor, would it be inappropriate to email them multiple times? And would I use the same email again?
Yeah, so no, it's not inappropriate at all. Like I said, we get busy. And, you know, if there's an email that I think, oh, I'll respond to that later, and it just, like I said, I get 50 emails a day. And so it gets lost. And so, you know, be persistent. That's perfectly fine. And in fact, that's when we start to notice you, right? If I get emails from people and they don't follow up on it, I forget about it. And so, yes, by all means, email them. And if you don't get a bite, you know, say if you email on Monday, by Thursday, if you haven't heard back from them, email them again. And yes, you can just kind of forward the email that you previously sent, and just say, you know, just to follow up, you know, I'm still very interested in meeting with you and talking with you, and do it a third time if you haven't heard from them. You know, like I said, there's a lot of things that are going on right now, and we may not always have your full and undivided attention.
We also have a question from, if I mispronounce, please forgive me, Ksenia. She said, how would you go about emailing a professor for research experience when you have little to none prior? Does it matter? And what should you highlight about yourself instead?
That's a great question. And that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, is that you need research experience, and you don't. And in fact, me personally, I prefer if students have zero research experience, like nothing, because that helps me train them properly. So there are some students who've had prior research experience, they come into the lab and I think, and as soon as they start working, I think, oh, they've picked up some bad habits. Yeah, so we have to untrain them and then retrain them. So, so no, all professors really are looking for is some enthusiasm and a good attitude and a willingness to learn new things. Those are your most important qualities.
Awesome, awesome. And I think we still have some time, so I'll ask a couple more. We have a question from Gabrielle. Gabrielle's asking, I was wondering if there are any virtual research opportunities such as survey-based research.
Probably. So I'm not that familiar with survey-based research. I'm more familiar, because I'm an imaging scientist, I'm more familiar with image analysis and literature reviews. And yes, we have been encouraged to take on undergraduate students to do those things. I'm sure that in the field of qualitative research, there are opportunities for survey-based research. Probably, I'm just trying to think of who would do that. Maybe in the field of health sciences, maybe in the field of epidemiology, perhaps. There will be some opportunities there.
Awesome, awesome. And another question from Lakshmi. If certain research positions require a university transcript of some sort, what do you recommend first-year students to include or use instead? And Lakshmi also mentioned, thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you, Lakshmi. So if I understand this correctly, some research positions require a university transcript. Okay, so that might be sort of like an opportunity in the summer, maybe after your first year. I'm not so familiar with those sorts of positions. Like for me, when I hire an undergrad, like I've had undergrads right in their first year, like first term, first year, through the work study program here at Western. And, you know, there was no need for a university transcript. So I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
What do you recommend first-year students to include or use instead?
Yeah, so just write sort of like a regular resume. You know, if you've had any volunteer experience, you know, if you've been on the an Ontario Scholar List, yeah, just sort of write generally about yourself, like just generate a regular resume, because we know as professors that students are right starting their first year, right? If you've had some research experience, if you've had the opportunity to do like a science project or a research project in high school, that's kind of like icing on the cake, right? We think, wow, but you know, don't worry so much about that. Like I said, what we really are looking for is just enthusiasm and a willingness to learn new things. Those are our basic qualifications for anybody who's going to be in the lab. The other thing that I do want to tell the students out there is that you want to make sure that the place in which you end up being is a good place for you, right? And so when you talk to professors and they talk to you about their work and you know you're interested in their research, the other thing you should be interested in is whether or not it's a really good place, right, for you. And if you end up in the lab and you end up, for whatever reason, not feeling comfortable or not feeling welcome, it's something to approach your professor about. It's something to talk to the other students about. And if you continue feeling uncomfortable, it's no, you don't have to stay. Okay, you can go. I did that when I was a PhD student. You know, I was in a lab that after a while I thought this is not working. It was a toxic environment and I couldn't do it anymore. So I just left, right? Because my self-worth and my mental health were more important. So, so one of the questions that I tell the students to ask professors, you know, as they're getting to know them, is, you know, do you have a laboratory code of conduct? And you know, if the professor says, oh yes, you know, and gives it to you, you know that this is somebody who really does care about their students and it's a good place to work.
Thank you, thank you. And we just had one, we'll take the last question here. Question from Rupreet. Rupreet was asking, I was wondering if there have been any barriers you've faced as a person of color and as a woman in the field of science. And additionally, thank you for the presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question. That's a really important question. And that's precisely why I showed the slide of my grandfathers and father, to show you that, you know, I do come from a position of privilege, even though I'm a woman of color here. that didn't really seem to factor when I was in high school and university. But I will say that I was, I was always at the top of the class. So if there had been a barrier because I was a woman of color, it was probably erased because I was at the top of the class. There's this saying that, being a woman in science or being a woman in the workforce, you have to work 3 times harder than other people to get recognized. And maybe I did. I did actually work hard and tried to be on my best behavior and have the best attitude, and whether or not that was conscious or unconscious on my part, that was certainly something that was a message that I had gotten somehow, that I really did need to, put my head down and work really hard to get to where I wanted to go. But interestingly, I think I have become a little bit more aware of these barriers as I progress up through the academic ladder. And that's not surprising, because when you see statistics like, 53% of our undergrads are female. And then as you go through the academic ranks, the percent of people who are females or assistant professors who are female drops, right? Assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, and then you get into the leadership of the university, and all of a sudden you're at 2% people of color. That's where you start to run into the barriers. And if you start to make noise about racism and sexism in the academic atmosphere, that's when you start to notice a little bit of pushback. And I certainly have noticed that. Now I'm in a senior position, and so I can afford to make some noise. Had I been active in anti-racism when I was an undergraduate student back in the 1980s, I don't think that would have been very well received.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dhanvantari, again for your amazing insight, wonderful presentation. We're really lucky to have you here with us tonight.
Well, thank you so much again. It was a real privilege to talk to the students today.
Thank you. Yes, on that note, we'll continue with the rest of our program tonight. Vicky, if you want to.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Also, I wanted to address, Vanira, we do see your question in the chat. We will be waiting for our student speaker panel again to address that question. So we will get your question answered throughout the presentation. But for now, we'd like to move on to our student speaker panel. So just to, I guess, introduce each speaker. First, we'll have Junaid speak a little bit about himself. So each speaker will introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their research placements, what research experience they've had, and also share a little bit of advice about what they've picked up throughout their research years. So we'll start with Junaid. Moving on, we'll go to Keith's experience, and then following that will be Rudra and then Alex. So first up, we'd like to give a warm welcome to Junaid, who will be sharing his research experience.
Thank you so much for that, Vicky. And hello, everybody. Welcome to this event. And I'm glad you could make it, especially with all the craziness of this of a new school year, especially in the middle of a pandemic going on. So I'm glad you could make it out today. So just to give you a brief background of sort of my journey to getting some research positions, I was, in first year starting out, I was really uncertain about, how to get a research position, how to talk to profs. I was not really, confident in my motivations for research, or sort of how I should approach people who may know a lot more than I do. And so that kind of really, the whole experience was super new to me. And so I completely understand where a lot of you are coming from, especially with the challenges of the pandemic that makes it much harder. And so hopefully myself and my fellow student panelists here can give you some insight on how to navigate this endeavor. So right now I'm in my 4th year of medical science in our specialization in epi and biostats. And it's a subject area that kind of deals with the population level determinants of health and disease. So a lot of things that you see on the news right now with COVID-19, with public health officers talking and discussing about various aspects of health and health economics, that's sort of what epidemiology and biostatistics kind of encompasses. And so some of the research placements I've been with, I started out with actually in Toronto at the UHN Kidney Health and Education Research Group, where I was a junior statistician. And this was, I think, in the middle of 2nd year. I was working remotely since that time, and it was lovely. I was able to apply my statistical skills and also learn from a lot of different researchers on different aspects of kidney health and psychosocial determinants of kidney transplantation and things like that. So it was my first sort of foray into clinical research, which was super interesting. My next, and then I started, getting a greater appreciation for public health and for population level epidemiology specifically. So I sought out more, a tailored research position here at Western with both the main department of Epi and Biostats with Dr. Anderson, who is actually now my thesis supervisor, and Dr. Stranges, who is a co-supervisor as well. And with the main department, I am currently looking at sort of sleep behaviors and how that is very little studied, because we all think that sleep is, so we all know sleep is important, but we don't really know how sleep works or how that is correlated with a lot of different aspects of our lives: mental health, psychosocial health, physical health, things like that. So that was super interesting. And also I worked finally with the Human Environment Analysis Lab, where I actually got out on the field to check out vaping ads and food ads advertisements, and how that actually impacts the health of the surrounding community. So that was really, really very interesting as well. So I had a sampling or a mix of both population and dataset based research, a lot of, dry lab research, as well as clinical research as well, and community research as well. So that was very, I'm very grateful for that. So the bite-sized tip that I put up here is about, rejection and being ghosted. And it can be very discouraging at first when you don't hear back from a professor, or sometimes a professor comes back with a sort of short, curt answer saying, we're not looking for students right now. And as I'm sure my fellow panelists will agree, it can be very discouraging at first, but it's always a good idea to use it as motivation. Take time to yourself and see and really assess what sort of message are you sending out? How can you change it? Look up to mentors, look up to career services at Western. They have virtual services right now, so that is super useful. And sort of figure out what sort of strengths you want to highlight and what sort of interests you yourself want to promote as well. And that is it from me. If you have any sort of questions or you just want to talk about research, generally speaking, or just life, my email is up there, jhusay8@uw.ca.
Thank you so much, Junaid. We really appreciated your story and inside tips and advice. Up next, we have Keith Afas as our next student speaker. So please give a warm welcome to Keith.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. As you mentioned, my name is Keith. I'm a fourth-year student here at the University of Western Ontario. I'm in medical biophysics currently. And my journey here, this is my second degree. My first degree was in medical science that I began in 2014. And roughly since about that point, I've been involved in research. So I really appreciate being invited here for the COUHR's event, because especially during COVID time, I do mathematical modeling as part of my research, which essentially is about using mathematics to translate nature and then using it to make predictions about nature. So it's extremely versatile. There's a lot of different areas in medical science that can benefit from mathematical modeling. And I've been involved in research since roughly about 2015. So I'll discuss some of the research placements I've been in since then. In first year, came in with, decent math skills, and I was able to sit down with one of the professors who was my professor in calculus at the time. And out of passion for research since I came here, I discussed more with him just to find out what kind of research he does, what kind of investigations he does. And based on the problem that he was working on at the time, I proposed a potential avenue to look into. And we began to form research in his lab, and we ended up looking into the paper, and it culminated in a publication in 2015. And since then, I was continuing to work with him in fluid dynamics and finished my degree in medical science roughly in 2019. And ever since then, similar to Dr. Dhanvantari, my intention was to go to medical school, and my marks were slightly low because research is an extremely demanding endeavor. So what I decided to do is come back here for a second degree in medical biophysics that uses some of my math skills and also focuses on health science, which I'm very much passionate about. So since I entered into there, I've been working with Dr. Goldman, and what we do together is we look at blood in the body and in your body circulation. And blood is a fluid, just like a lot of different types of fluids. So there's a lot of techniques from physics that you can use to be able to look into different ways that oxygen spreads through the body without actually using microscopes, just by using some rough variables that we can see. And so that's essentially the research that I've been doing with him up until now. And if there's any kind of advice I'd have for students that are interested in research, firstly, it would be to kind of reach out to professors, that there's no idea that's too small, and that anyone with kind of a curiosity for the world around them is interested in research. And contacting professors is it's an intimidating experience to reach out to professors, but professors are humans much like all of us, and sitting down for them and beginning to talk about them with research is one of the best ways to kind of get an appreciation for what they do and see if it's something that they're willing to accept you on. And yeah, that's what I'd recommend, is to get in contact with professors and sit down with them. And that's kind of one of the best ways that you can get involved in research. So I have my contact info there in emails, and anyone who's interested in any kind of research, particularly in regards to mathematical modeling, I'd highly encourage them to reach out to me. And just, if any questions about life, really, just exactly as Junaid said, any questions, to reach out to my email and contact me. And I'd love to give them some advice of the journey that I've been through up until now, and any advice of how they can get involved in research themselves.
Thank you so much for sharing, Keith. I love how everyone's so approachable tonight, and we definitely have such a unique set of experiences that you guys can speak from. Next up, as our student speaker, I'd like to introduce Rudra, who will be sharing some of his experiences.
So hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for coming to this event. I'm so happy to see everyone here. I'm in my fourth year of medical sciences with a specialization in IMS. And as you can see on the slide, I've worked in 2 labs throughout my undergrad. And I thought I would kind of focus my talk more in a story format. So I would start off with a story. I'm from Calgary, and when I was in high school, I heard stories of people getting research positions in high school. So one fine day in grade 11, I set off to UCalgary on a mission to get a research position. As you can probably imagine, back then, I was in for a rude awakening. I managed to set up a meeting with an amazing prof who did work on brain imaging, and I assumed that I had pretty much secured a research position. I didn't even know about the scientific method at this point. So at the prof's office, I sat in silence as he talked to me about his research for 25 minutes, and I understood nothing. I took the hour-and-a-half train journey home, and without any clue about what just happened. I had no research position, and I felt the guilt of wasting this professor's time. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because I strongly believe that if you're looking for research opportunities as a student, you need to be doing it for a purpose. For example, if you're in first year, you might have started thinking about the applications of genetics and biochemistry that you learned in first year bio. You might want to consolidate your future academic or career choices. And that is exactly what I conveyed to Dr. Klein, who gave me my first research position. And this sort of tackles the myth that you need to contact hundreds of professors to get a research position. That's simply not true. If you share your purpose with the professors you contact, you'll be successful much quicker. Share what you want to learn. It's okay to not know anything. It's okay to be in first year and never had a research position before, but you must know what you want to learn from the professors. During COVID times specifically, where can you look? You can try for dry lab research positions, as many of the other speakers have mentioned before, such as systematic reviews, patient surveys, review article writing. You can look at departments which are often overlooked, such as epidemiology or even the Brain and Mind Institute. These departments have incredible researchers who are often clinician scientists who work as doctors in some weeks of the day, some days of the week, and who do clinical research on other days. And oftentimes there's even medical residents who work in these labs, and it can turn into an amazing networking opportunity for you. Science is incredibly interdisciplinary, and as you can imagine, epidemiology isn't just all about stats and numbers. You can find amazing clinical applications in these departments. Another tip that I've gained from my experience as an undergrad is do take a look at the emails that you get from Schulich. If you guys are in MedSci, you probably get these weekly or like bi-weekly emails that kind of highlight what's going on in the department. And they often highlight research opportunities. They often highlight internships, like awards and stuff. And it's precisely how I got my internship during COVID this April. And I would like to leave you all with a little context on my bite-sized tip, which kind of addresses one of the questions that we got earlier in the chat. It's that it's never too late to find research opportunities. I have worked in 2 labs with Dr. Klein and Dr. Lazo Langner, and both of these professors I contacted in March and April, respectively. Well, I would not recommend that for everyone because there's obviously labs get filled up. But all I want to say is if you find yourself in a position where you've tried all year and you still haven't managed to get a position, don't give up. Research projects don't follow the timeline of the school year as closely as you would think. The current systematic review project that I'm working on is slated to end somewhere in November. So any time is a good time to reach out to a prof if you feel connected to their lab and their work. Thank you for listening. And feel free to contact me. My email is on the slide.
Thank you so much, Rudra. I really appreciate you sharing your inside experience and all the tips and advice you have for our students today. And last but certainly not least, we have Alex to talk about his experiences as well.
Thanks for the warm intro, Rebecca. Yep, that's me. I'm Alex, and I'm a 4th-year student in Honors Spec Physiology. That's under the MedSci program. Definitely came a long way since I was a first year. And I remember I was in the same exact position as you guys. Used to be a first-year student, like some of you are here, of course, but I had no idea what research even was at the time. So it's quite surreal for me to be in front of you guys right now, giving advice about research, not to mention during COVID. Some background information about me. Because I came from British Columbia, I graduated high school there. The province of Ontario was really a new place for me. I didn't know which programs were available, who to contact, where I should even start looking. So the summer after my first year, I didn't get a research position. Some of my friends did, but I didn't. But it was really only after first year of summer and in second year that the tide started to change for me. And I worked at Dr. Hill's lab during the academic year. And I was dealing with computational genome sequencing. And in the following summer at Toronto General Hospital, I was funded under the summer undergrad research program at U of T. And I studied the genetic kidney diseases, and I did a poster presentation in which I won a first place award for. And I was slated to come back to this lab this past summer, but COVID forced me to look elsewhere. And thankfully, I did land a remote position at London Health Sciences Centre, where I examined the effectiveness of telemedicine in nephrology clinics. So as it currently stands, my research interest really lies in genetic kidney disease, metabolic disease, and telemedicine. But how did I do all this? Well, even during COVID, how did I manage to convince a professor to take me and conduct meaningful research? Well, timing is extremely important. This is where I would slightly disagree with Rudra from his bite-sized advice, simply because I was looking for positions in the GTA region, where competition is very high. Usually the profs that turned me down already had students hired in December or even November. So writing down an email script down early will help a lot. Unless you have valuable background experience, then first come, first serve is your best bet. Communicating with upper years about this will also help you. So you can target the right PIs and know when the deadlines are for student programs. And they tend to be in late January and mid-February. I personally regret not doing this as much in first year, and I really did miss out a lot of opportunities in the process. The other dimension of this, though, is that you also have to know how to express your interests. One of the things we do for core is recruit professors, and we do talk a lot with them, and Dr. Dhanvantari also expressed this. It's extremely clear that they know lots of students look for research positions to sometimes check off a box for medical school requirements, for other superficial reasons. So they know a superficial student when they see one. So composing your email with lots of effort is crucial. Although I would say in many instances I got lucky too. I only had to email about 25-ish PIs to land one research position per season, sometimes even less, like 15. Well, how did I do that? Well, I would recommend expressing what sorts of research interests you have based on courses or personal exploration. But if you didn't have one like me back then, emphasize the learning outcomes and why research experiences will make your undergrad more robust. When I covered all these points in my email, including my past experiences in courses and related activities, it would span about 4 paragraphs. It's quite a long email, not to mention including my transcript and CV or resume. So I noticed that lots of PIs do look at your CVs to evaluate you, but in my point of view, a well-written email is really what grabs their attention in the first place, especially when you're competing against so many other students. So it does take a substantial amount of effort. You have to reflect on how you want to present yourself to the PIs. And it's important for first years especially. It's like an interview. It's your chance to stand out, and usually do that through email. Now, I don't know if I have the time to go into detail how you should compose your email right now, but all in all, they should be long enough to make yourself believable and copyable enough to send to many PIs. Initially, I also read up on PI's past research papers, but in retrospect, I thought it was a big waste of time. Back then, I tried to make connections with the papers and stuff I learned from first year biology, and looking back at some of the emails, I made some really, really incorrect and stupid statements. Now, I don't think it jeopardized my emails in any way, but it did take more time than I wanted to. And I know I didn't need to necessarily do this, because when I scouted for positions again, I actually got more research placements offers without necessarily parsing their papers in detail. But just knowing where their general interests lie and having a really sincere conversation about their personal interests as well, connecting it back to your interests or learning, I think are enough, in my opinion. Now, lastly, it's a popular myth among first years that wet labs seem quote unquote better than dry labs. All my experiences have been dry labs, and the type of work is different, no doubt. But I still thought I learned so much from them. Clinical research also tends to be more dry lab oriented. In fact, during COVID, dry labs tend to run at higher capacities because it's easier to work remotely. In fact, right now I'm still doing work for my PIs at TGH and in LHSC. So in any university, I recommend targeting the epidemiology and biostatistics department. That is where I looked around in April. And you would be very surprised how copious the amount of opportunities are in that area. Now, my fourth research placement, as you see underneath there, is a little bit more unorthodox. It's not a placement in a faculty lab per se, but instead a group of self-sufficient students coming together to conduct research on their own. That's exactly what our team at CORE did over the summer. You will hear about this more in detail later in the presentation, but essentially we are about to conduct a survey study about the effectiveness of our infographics that we published over the summer. So this study protocol and survey design was made completely from scratch by us, and we recently received ethics approval by Western Justice Month. We did recruit a couple of faculty members, Dr. Murray Juna and Dr. Lauren Barr, to guide us through the study. But in the end, what I'm trying to say is, it should tell you that research placements don't always need to occur in a university or hospital lab. You can run a study by yourself. And if you get good data, the next step is to write a manuscript and get it published. And for us, our goal is to get published on STEM Fellowship Undergrad Journal, which we think is a totally viable goal for undergrads like us. So if you feel like you've run out of options for getting an official research placement, then I would strongly urge you to exercise your independence. Sometimes you just gotta do things on your own, but the rewards are equally, if not more, tremendous. All this does require some level of experience through courses and ECs, but with the right people and the right vision, it's completely possible to do it in your earlier years. There's my bite-sized tip for you. Scout for opportunities early. Emailing and successfully obtaining a position is sometimes first come, first serve. Network with upper years, bug your softs, ask really specific questions so that they can give you the most helpful information possible. And last but not least, show your passion by giving great reasons why you care about getting a research position, research experience. Yeah, biggest emphasis on network with upper years. It's going to be difficult to do this this school year, but I think this is why CORE exists for you guys. We are all upper years here, and we would be so glad to help you out during these peak times. We understand the struggles too. We've all been there, and it would be my pleasure to be by your side, which is a luxury I didn't necessarily have when I was in your position. So there's my email underneath my picture there. Don't be afraid to drop a message, and good luck with your academic year and your research journey.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alex. That's definitely a very different perspective that I'm sure we all really appreciated hearing. Next, I'd like to open up the floor to our Q&A session for the student speakers. To get the ball rolling, I'd like to go back to Verina's question from earlier. She asked about if you want to find a research position for the summer, when should I start contacting professors for that? And I know that Rudra and Alex, you guys have addressed that question a little bit in your introduction. So would Junaid or Keith like to tackle this one?
Sure, I'd like to give it a go if that's okay. So about when to, if you're trying to get a research position for the summer specifically, like Rudra and Alex mentioned, there doesn't seem to be a real correct answer for that. I think it's a greater priority to sort of figure out what your interests are and sort of just browse around, do your homework, sort of like what Dr. Dhanvantari said earlier. And I think it's a good idea to at least sort of start emailing as soon as you can. That being said, if you haven't, because it can take some time for professors to get back to you. So I think start emailing as soon as you can, but there's no specific time of the year when sort of emails, when sort of you have a greater probability of being answered or getting a research position per se. Since like Rudra mentioned, a lot of projects don't necessarily follow the same timelines, even between labs. So it's a good idea to just start as soon as possible and get your, adapt to the situation as it comes about.
Thank you for that answer, Junaid. If anybody else has any other questions like before, feel free to type them into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves and ask the question directly. That's fine as well.
Thank you, Dr. Dhanvantari. It was a pleasure to have you tonight.
If we don't have any specific questions from the floor, we can move on to, we've set up some misconceptions that we'd like our speakers to address directly. Throughout this period, if you come up with any questions of your own, again, feel free to send them into the chat as well. So Rebecca, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So for the first misconception, we're just going to go in the order of our student speakers. So Junaid, if you can comment on the first one, that'll be wonderful. So I'll just read it out. Research is focused a lot on doing rather than reading and writing. What do you think about that, Junaid?
Yeah, thank you for that, Rebecca. So one of my supervisors, he keeps saying to read more, to write more, to read more, especially. And so that already kind of debunks this misconception that, yeah, research has some activity, it has some hands-on components to it, depending on the lab you're at, but it's a lot more important to kind of keep yourself up with the literature and keep yourself up with how to adequately and clearly communicate results, because a lot of these results can actually inform other researchers, but also inform a lot of policy depending on the area you're working on. So I think it's a lot more important, especially right now as you're looking for research positions, but even after you've got one, to continue reading in the field you're working in or the field you're interested in, to sort of get a lay of the land of your field, and also have a more, open mind about what is going right with the field, what's going wrong with the field, what can still be discovered, what can still be worked on. So I think more than doing, I feel like reading and writing is a huge component of research.
Thank you, Junaid. That's really, really wonderful to hear. As for a second misconception, I will ask Keith to tackle this one. So faculty members require students to have a full understanding and knowledge of their research topic.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'll definitely begin by saying that in my experience, that misconception is exactly, as you guys said, a misconception. In my experience, a lot of the research I've done, you may be very well acquainted with one aspect of the research, or even just kind of familiar with one aspect of the research, but not the whole picture as a whole. And it's the mark, I think, of a good supervisor to encourage you in directions of where to look to kind of get more information about it, because at its heart, I think echoing what Junaid mentioned, is research is a lot about innovation. It's a lot about creating something new or improving on something that's existing, and that requires you to have a decent knowledge of the topic, but that knowledge may not necessarily need to be there at the beginning of conducting research. So especially a lot of times, if you touch base with the professor and you get to talking with them, they kind of know where your knowledge is and where your knowledge needs to be in order to complete the project to an adequate quality, and they'll help guide you in where to kind of improve your basic knowledge. But I would say definitely be prepared to do a fair bit of reading, because it is a lot of getting up to speed, but a good professor will help guide you towards there.
Wonderful, thank you again. As for our third misconception, Rudra, I think you're up next. You need to cold email 100 or more professors by email in order to get a research position.
Yeah, so I kind of addressed this in my speech, but I would like to say again that if you really demonstrate the reason behind why you're seeking a research position and give specific outcomes that you want to get from working in their labs, I think that will really help you get research positions faster. Additionally, writing an email, like, this comes with experience and time, but don't end off the email by saying, would you give me a research position or something along those lines? Try to set up a meeting with the prof. Say like, would you be available to meet next week or available to meet sometime? And that way, once you meet them in person and show them, your personality and talk to them face to face and like shake their hands, you kind of gain not shake their hands in COVID times, obviously, but just set up a Zoom call over COVID times and just talk to them and kind of set that foot in the door. And yeah, it's all about how you communicate through the email. So the email process is very important. And this is certainly a myth because there's so many labs, and if you truly pursue the labs that you want, you will be more successful. Don't just email everyone in a department, because that's obviously, it's not realistic, and obviously you can't possibly be interested in everything in a certain department. So pursue your interests, and I'm sure, I think I can speak for everyone, but we didn't email 100 professors to get research positions. That's just not true.
Thank you for debunking that myth, Rudra. And last but not least, for a fourth misconception, doing research typically involves being inside a lab and doing hands-on experiments. So Alex, if you can tackle that one.
I sure can. Well, during COVID times, it's going to be very difficult to obtain a lab position where they do allow you to do hands-on research. Usually what hands-on research in my mind entails is using lab equipment, going inside the building, wearing a lab coat, all that kind of wet lab stuff. There are some labs that are running at 60% capacity, but sadly that's the highest I've seen so far. My thesis course right now, it's wet lab, but they're only running at 20 to 40. So during COVID, it's going to be very difficult. But as you can already see from our student speeches, that you can still do research during in this past summer and the upcoming summer as well. But usually it takes time to pinpoint what type of research are in dry labs. Usually studies like survey or systematic review or like a scoping review, those are hands-off research, I would say, that you can do remotely. Although the work does entail very different things. So for my research experience at Toronto General Hospital, I always went to work physically, but I wasn't really wearing a lab coat per se. I was more so grabbing, patient records, letters, lab numbers, just going back and forth, taking those records onto my table and screening them meticulously. I don't know if you would call that a hands-on research, but it's definitely something that is unorthodox compared to the normal conception of what a hands-on research is. But you can still get a meaningful experience out of it. You're just working with very different tools. And like Junaid and Keith said, it also involves reading a lot of the literature review, because when you get a project, you typically need to know a direction. And a lot of my projects they were just done from scratch. The professor said, I'm thinking of doing this type of study. Could you do some literature review and try to give it more direction? So a lot of independence is given onto the student, even in a professional setting. And you're not always necessarily doing hands-on research. You will be going back home, you'll be doing more readings on your own, you'll be emailing professors to discuss what your results are. So it's very multifaceted. So typically, in being in the lab, doing hands-on experiments, yeah, you can definitely do it. I find it very hard to believe that's going to happen during COVID. But just because it's not the hands-on experiments that you're thinking of doesn't mean it's going to detract from your joy of doing research. This is going to be very different compared to what you thought. And I think keeping an open mind and just trying your hardest, and eventually you'll find something very meaningful coming out of it in terms of learning outcomes.
Thank you, Alex. And so we'd like to thank again all the student speakers who came and shared with us their experiences today. And now we're going to switch gears a little bit. You might still have burning questions about CORE. I know I sort of talked a little bit about what our organization was about, but you might still be wondering sort of what projects or programs we have planned, how can you get involved? And so I'd like to pass it on to Rudra and Alex just to share again more about our organization and what it entails.
Yeah, so CORE stands for the Canadian Organization of Undergraduate Health Research, and it's a nationally registered non-for-profit with branches all around Canada. So there's branches in other universities and other cities. The main mandate of CORE is to provide research opportunities for underrepresented students on campus. So in the past, we facilitated connections between professors and students who are looking for their first research opportunity. Unfortunately, this summer, our research program got canceled, so we decided to start a bi-weekly publication called Staying Current with COVID. I hope a lot of you have seen these infographics, as our goal was to present newest COVID findings from research papers in an easy to read manner on social media. Through this project, we also started, we provided about 24 students, many of whom had lost their research jobs due to COVID, with a literature review experience. Through this project, we also started working on our own studies called Script, which Alex briefly mentioned before. It's an independent project that we're doing, which aims to evaluate the effectiveness of our infographics. So Script stands for Surveying COVID-related Infographics in the Public Today. And we can't wait to share the findings from this study with everyone, but we need your help. And I'm gonna pass it on to Alex to tell you more about that.
Yep. Now this is where you want to hear about what we have planned for the future. If you can go on to the next slide, this is what our Script study is exactly. We are doing a survey study, and like I said, we created a survey methodology over the summer, and we're finally excited to tell you guys that we're releasing this to the general public, targeted to the Western University specifically. Taking the survey doesn't take long. You get to enter for a chance to win some money. You also get to contribute significantly towards a research study that is important during the pandemic, where misinformation is quite possibly far more reaching and impactful than the virus. Now, how else will answering the survey help you in other ways? Well, giving us valuable data about how we can use infographics to minimize infodemics in social media. It will speak volumes to how we're going to be navigating online media in the future. But it also speaks volume to the feasibility of our summer program. So in other words, our Script study is going to be a benchmark, our evidence that independent research at Western is possible. So what the core team did over the summer is we want to transfer that exact experience over to you, the underrepresented students of science. So next slide, there's more information on that. The details of this are still in the works. We plan to release applications at around end of January. In this way, those people who have already applied for NSERC and other research funds would be good to go. They would have their own summer research experience. And we want to target those who haven't been able to secure a research job heading into the summer. So that's the cohort that we're targeting. As it stands right now, we plan to offer 3 types of studies: a survey study, which is what we're doing for Script, a systematic review, or a scoping review. These can be done remotely at your home. It gives you more flexibility to do other things while still obtaining meaningful research experience. And I think with the right mentors, and we're going to be recruiting faculty members and experienced research students like Rudra, Junaid, or Keith, this is completely feasible. So like any research program, we are going to be offering a certification we're going to be offering a certification after you complete the program. The end goal is that, and this is the best part of our program, is that we plan to have you authored in an undergraduate research journal. So WERJ is an undergrad journal at Western, and STEM is probably the most well-known undergraduate journal. So after you've created your hypothesis, you've chosen your area of study, you collect data, analyze it, and then comes the manuscript writing process. And in the end, we want to give you that concrete benefit of publishing and getting your name out there. And once you finish that program, now you're able to tell other professors out there saying, I have done independent research in some structured format, and I think these are the learning outcomes I brought out of that experience, and I want to be able to apply it in a more professional setting. So this is going to hopefully serve as a significant launch pad for many people here. And I hope that you'll be interested. Stay in touch with our Instagram page and Facebook, and we'll give you more information soon.
Okay, I guess we'll move on to the next slide.
Oh, sorry, before we move on, we do have a question in the chat. Gabrielle asked, do I have to be a student at Western to participate in this program?
Yeah, I can answer that. Most likely, yes. We are still trying to understand our target cohort better, and that will unfortunately not be clear until we actually receive applications. But we are, if we can also target students from the Southwestern Ontario region, that's, I think, great social benefit for many more people. But we'll have to see. We'll give you more details in the future.
All right, cool. Thank you, Alex, for answering. We can move on now. If you are also continually wondering how you can get involved with our organization, we also have outreach coordinator applications opening up soon. So we do have our VP marketing here today as well to talk to you a little bit about that, because as outreach coordinator, you will be serving under our marketing division. So Emily, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Chambers. I am a fourth year IB and MIT dual degree student. So I do not come from a science background. However, I was very excited to get involved with CORE this year and kind of learn how to market scientific communications. So just some fun facts about CORE's marketing. Our Instagram account, which we've started not even for 4 months, has almost achieved 2,000 followers as of date, over 400 followers on Facebook, and our Staying Current with COVID program or infographics series had impressions of over 57,000 people. So definitely an interesting opportunity and definitely an interesting club to market. So working with me is my Director of Partnerships and Media Strategy. I'll have him introduce himself and talk a little bit more about the first year opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I'm Will, like Emily said, and like Emily, I am an MIT Ivy dual degree student in my 4th year. So I also come from more of a business background than the science background. And I think this is a really, really great opportunity for a lot of you who are looking to get involved for something that both scratches that science itch as well as that business or marketing itch. If that is something that you have explored or something that you're looking to explore, this is a fantastic opportunity for you. I can tell you that first-year representatives will work very closely with the CORE London marketing team, which is currently comprised of myself, the Director of Partnerships and Media Strategy, and Emily, the VP of Marketing. And you'll be working with us in order to support CORE programming, distribute promotional materials, and also be giving us dynamic feedback as a representative for the student body to ensure that CORE is creating relevant and timely programming that is something that you would want to see from the organization. And of course, this is a great foot to get in the door if you want to join our exec team or something in the future. It is absolutely awesome to look at as a resume saying as a first year you were representative with us. So we will be putting applications up this coming Friday, the 25th, and we'll be running those applications until midnight on Friday, October 2nd. So that's a 1-week period in which you can apply there. And we hope to see a lot of you guys apply. It's a great opportunity, and very, very exciting things are happening this year.
Thank you so much, Will. And so if you guys have any questions about the applications or anything about CORE in general, please feel free to message us on our social media platforms, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And I guess this is a sad time when we have to say our goodbyes, but that brings us to the end of our Myth Busted workshop. A huge thank you to all our student speakers and Dr. Dhanvantari in giving their time to share really thoughtful and insightful stories and experiences about their research journey. And we'd also like to thank all our graphic designers, marketing teams, and everyone in our CORE team who helped to make this workshop possible. And so to all our attendees, thank you for coming, and please be sure to follow us on social media and stay tuned and current with CORE. And so we look forward to seeing you in our future events. And until next time, everyone, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
All right, I think we've chosen to end this call at this point. So I've noticed like Keith and Junaid, you guys are still here along with the team. Thank you again so much for contributing your time and like offering the advice to our members here in the call today. We really appreciate it.
No worries,
Thanks for
our
having me,
pleasure.
guys.
So what's everybody's plans moving forward?
Plans for Core or plans?
That's for tonight, bro.
Oh,
I can. I don't think that far ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was well done, guys. That was awesome.
For the non-core members, yeah, what did you guys think?
That was fun.
I wanted to congratulate you guys for getting Savita. That was really like that's a wonderful prof to get, and it's nice having a second medical biophysics member here. That was really cool.
Huge shout out to Rebecca.
Oh,
Yeah.
I took her class in like second year or something, but no, third year, my bad. But it was a really fun course, and she's just such an approachable person and really passionate about students and research. So I thought, she's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I took the course a while ago too.
I really love, like she mentioned like the whole like knowing like your self-worth like in a lab alongside like having your interest in that lab, and it's not something you hear like a lot as an undergrad. It was like a really different perspective.
Yeah,
for sure.
To be honest, like if I heard that, I still would have struggled. Like she speaks facts, right? But like as a first year, when I heard that, it's still very intimidating for me. It's like, where is my interest at this point? Because I know certainly in first year bio, I thought I was interested in genetics, and then second year hit me. That's very
wow.
Don't scare Oliver or Bernie.
Oh, true.
Apple.
It's gonna be a fun time.
Just think of genetics and hear so many dreams cracking. Like,
oh,
genetics is bad.
When that second midterm mark came